I normally do my speaking in guitar stores. Bookstore customers are so quiet. Normally I'll come and I'll do something in a guitar store, and it's loud and people are playing Stairway to Heaven in all four corners.
They told us not to touch those.
Did they really?
Yeah.
Wow.
It's almost so quiet.
Okay, I'll let the party start here pretty soon. Like, have at it. So yeah, I never really thought I'd be giving a talk about a book about guitars or about business. Like I say, normally I'm talking about the guitars itself. How many people here are guitar players? Yeah, guitar fans. I would imagine that that a lot of the people that are drawn to this book are drawn because of the guitar, their love of guitar. Well, I grew up here. I grew up in Claremont, just go right up Balboa to where you hit Balboa and Genesee is kind of right where I grew up. And I used to ride my bicycle down to Pacific Beach and to Mission Bay. I had a unicycle. Used to ride that. Beat that. Get on that and ride that thing all the way down to the pier at Pacific Beach, and then fill your bathing suit full of salt and sand, and then get on it and ride it back. Beat that. Do we have native San Diegans here? Yeah, excellent. Well, I wrote this book actually this summer. I was approached in July actually, and I accepted the challenge to write it. And in August, September, October, I got the book written, and it's just recently come out. And it really is the story of how Taylor Guitars was born and how we took it from a really small little local company to the company it is now. Right now we're making more than 500 guitars every day, if you can imagine that. I still can't imagine it. It's like, where do all those guitars go? We have a factory in El Cajon that has about 400 people working, and about 10 years ago we started a little factory down in Tecate, Mexico, just making cases and doing some woodworking for us. But as that developed, we were able to then design new models of guitars that we wouldn't be able to afford to make in the United States, and a lot of people would go off to China to do it, but we were not interested in that. So we slowly built that into a small guitar shop, and it eventually became a pretty good sized guitar factory with about 300 people in it, and they're making this guitar here is one of our starter guitars and a little travel guitar, and they make that among another 4 or 5 models that we do. But Taylor Guitars was that same kind of story that you hear a lot of times in business, where you're back there, nobody knows about you, and it's a struggle, it's a struggle, it's a struggle, it's a struggle. We spent 12 years. Has anybody already read the book? Okay, so just one person. Seth was talking about how Rust Never Sleeps was a really important movie in our career, and I'll tell you that story a little bit. It really is the introduction to the book. But I remember I was buddies with my friend Steve Phillips, and he was into music, and he'd read books, and he'd give me the cool report every day. I was kind of a wood shop nerd, you know, and I played guitar in between being a nerd, and I just built things. And I started building guitars, and our company had been started for, I think, 3 years or so. And Steve called me and he said, "Hey, Neil Young has this movie out, it's called Rust Never Sleeps, and I hear he plays your guitar in it." I'm like, no way. It's like, yeah, it's playing down Pacific Cinerama down in Mission Valley, that big 70-foot screen where I saw Star Wars, you know, when it first came out. And I saw Grand Prix with Paul Newman on the front row, like eating flicks until I got sick and went back and had to throw up, and I can't even just see a flick to this day, you know. But it's real fond memories of that time. Well, we got together and we went down there, and I went with a few buddies, and they're like, hey Bob, does he play your guitar? He's a really cool guy. Can you get us his autograph? How do you know that? Like, I didn't know anything. You know, I didn't know anything about it. I'm like, would you guys shut up? I don't know anything about it. And then we'd sit down and they'd like, hey, Neil Young plays his guitar, you know, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I was trying to like sink back. What if he doesn't play the guitar? But he did. And 20 minutes into the movie, 30 minutes into the movie, he shows up and he's playing. I mean, he's 2 stories tall. The sound is awesome. And he plays a 12-string that we made that he had bought from a dealer in Florida, actually. And it was a glorious moment. So I was 22 years old, I guess, at the time, and I'd made a few guitars, and I watched Neil play that thing on that screen, and it was an awesome night. It was really neat. And then the next day I went back and had to sort of fight my way through the day, you know, and try and build a business. It didn't change my life at all. And that was the interesting thing about celebrities playing guitars and that type of thing. It really didn't make a difference. What made a difference was just your head down, perseverance, making guitars, showing them to dealers. Eventually, and we were making guitars for just local people around here, but that was right about the time that we had branched out and found a dozen dealers, a couple in LA, a couple out of state, a couple here, a couple there, and they were selling our guitars. And you know, it was rough. It was, you know, we'd make these guitars, and at the end of the day, at the end of the month, they didn't bring in nearly as much money as our expenses were. There were 3 partners at the beginning. After 8 years, my partner that I currently have from day one, him and I bought out the second partner, so it's been the 2 of us, Kurt Listad and myself. And you know, we just, every day we just kept it going, you know. And I would learn the craft of building guitars. He would learn the craft of accounting and selling. And eventually we both got pretty good at that. And we began to build this company. We grew it up a little bit and it didn't work, and we shrank it back down. And we grew it again and it didn't work, and it shrank it back down. About the 3rd time we tried, it started to take. And we were making 2 guitars a day, and then 3 guitars a day, and then 4 guitars a day. It's like, oh my gosh, 4 guitars a day. We couldn't believe that anybody could ever make that many guitars. And it just kept going. We'd have to figure out new methods of how to build things and how to train people. So currently we're 700 people, several 100,000 square feet. We have, we've just recently opened our own distribution for Europe in Amsterdam, and so we have our warehouse and our sales staff and everything over there. We're pretty deep into our supply. We have real good relationships with, in fact, in 2 weeks I'll fly to Honduras, where I'll howdy up, I'll say, with some communities that are way back there that cut mahogany just for us. We supply 40% of their community's annual income. There's 3 of them back there. And these are places where you take a plane, you know, train boat, you know, pretty soon you're in a canoe, and then you're walking, you know, to finally get there, literally. You know, the last little bit is 2 or 3 hours of walking to get there. So it's really interesting business, because on the one hand, you're taking care of trying to do good forest husbandry and taking care of real primitive, you know, people, and trying to leave their lifestyle kind of the way that it is. That's the way they want it, but just do some commerce with them in a real rustic way. And on the other hand, there's, you know, Taylor Swift and Zach Brown and kind of the glamour that goes with some of the celebrities that you know. And then in between all that is just work a day, running the factory, you know, taking care of employees, and trying to keep it all together. And it's been the joy of my life, building guitars all that time. Being a native San Diegan, watching that whole company grow here. So that's really what the book's about. And along the way, what I do is I just tell stories in the book. Each one of them is a business lesson in the end. I find that over the years I've just grown to love business. I started out just wanting to make guitars. And in order to do that, you have to be in business. You can only make yourself 1 or 2 or 3 or 4. And if you want to keep making them, or even 5 or 6. But if you want to keep making them, you're going to have to sell one. And after that, you're going to have to sell another one. And if you sell another one, you can keep doing it. and the next thing you know, you're in business. And so you might as well sign up and love what business is all about. And that's what brought us to this point, where I just wrote the book on the story. It talks about our branding. It talks about the factory, the secrets that I learned early on about how to run a production and how to, especially a craft-based production in the United States, and make it profitable. You know, how to take care of employees. You know, I can remember when we had 30, 40 employees, and it was like, you know, it's like, what am I, this is awful, this isn't working, you know, I feel like I'm babysitting all day. And I remember that day that Kurt and I hired a consultant, and we went down to an empty warehouse and set up looked like a Russian interrogation room, you know. We set up a card table and a lamp, you know, and we sat there for 4 days struggling, talking about what are we going to do next with our business. And what we came out with was, we're going to learn how to take care of employees. And so that's what we did, and we were able to get through that. I write about that in the book. There was a time when we figured out we got to just quit selling guitars, and we've got to market guitars. We've got to build a brand. We've got to build a name that people recognize and get that brand going. And so I talk about that. It's a chapter about branding. There's a lot of long-term projects in our business. I call it, when I started the Tecate factory, people would ask me, what are you doing down there? What's your plan? And I said, my business plan is stated like this: in 10 years we'll be glad we did. That's my business plan. Right? And there are a lot of things sometimes in your life that you can't justify it tomorrow or the next day, or to put a bunch of, you know, heavy work onto it right now, but you know that in 10 years you'll be glad you did. And so there's a chapter that talks about that. There's a chapter I call The Third Owner, and it talks about this thing I've observed over the years. I use a local deli right in our industrial park, where you know, you'll see someone, they open a deli and they go out of business, but they sell it to somebody else, right? And then they pour everything into it and they sell it to somebody else, and that third person who owns it, finally, they gained all the equity of the first three people. The third owner sort of makes it. And the first time I noticed that was when I read a historical book about the area in East County called Spring Valley, where I live. And that happened with ranches back in the 1850s. You know, someone would come from Chicago, they'd come out to this raw, untamed land. There's no water, it's arid, there's no fruit trees, you go out there now and you turn on a spigot and water your grass, but it wasn't like that back then. And so the first owner would come out and they would work to make that ranch happen, and they'd use everything up they have, and they'd move to San Diego and get a job. Used to talk about when people would go from Lemon Grove to San Diego, they'd spend a whole day because it takes so long to get there. And I'm thinking, it's kind of the same way now, you know? You just get in traffic and just, well, maybe I'll spend the night when I get there, you know? And it was the third owner of the ranch that did it. And this idea developed over a period of time that, you know, you could be your own third owner if you can just make it through those times. But I see a lot of people exit, you know, and sell it to that second owner, or the next one sells it to someone else. But if you could figure out a way to get through. And I read that book years ago when our business was struggling, and I made a little correlation. I thought, you know, I'm going to hang on to this until I get to reap the rewards. I know a lot of guitar companies out there, they're on their third and fourth owner, and the first 2 or 3 people, they're just gone, they're doing something else. But the other ones have a guitar company. It's doing fine because of the equity that someone else put in. So it's just stories like that of things that have happened over the years, and that's how I teach those business lessons. So that's really the synopsis of the book. And you know, if you guys have any questions either about the book or about Taylor guitars, I imagine a lot of you, being local, you know about Taylor guitars, you're guitar fans. And I can answer any questions about that kind of stuff. If anyone's got anything, now's your opportunity. Yes, sir.
How much time do you spend a day playing guitar now?
Minutes.
A few minutes here and there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when I was young, I played guitar all the time. And then when I started building guitars, there was a little bit less time for that. But I did spend about 20 years playing guitar in our church worship team. And there was 3 services on a Sunday, and I'm playing in front of crowds of 1,000 people every
Acoustic
Sunday morning,
guitar.
acoustic guitar. And
Taylor?
yeah, Taylor. And I played a lot of electric guitar too, and it was usually an Anderson or Paul Reed Smith. And and we would have to practice on Thursday nights, and I'd have to put in an hour a day of practice just to learn the stuff. And it was neat. I learned a lot about guitar playing with great piano and horn players and that type of thing. Now I play a little bit less because playing guitar, my interest has kind of moved away from playing guitar right now. And it's you bring up an interesting question, because I did an interview the other day, and the interviewer had the preconceived notion that a lot of people think that since I build guitars, that my biggest passion must be playing guitars. Almost like if you're a chef, your biggest passion must be eating. But you know what I mean? But that's not necessarily true. My biggest passion is building things. So while I may come and ebb and flow out of guitar playing, I never, ever ebb and flow out of building things. You know, I'm always building something. And whether it's guitars or whether it's furniture, I'm a big furniture builder. And last about 4 or 5 years, I've been building like off-road expedition vehicles and doing a lot of stuff like that. I like to do that type of travel. So my interests tend to lie a little bit more there. If I'd have been an incredible guitar player like I'd wanted to have been when I was young, I probably wouldn't have pursued guitar making. So it worked out good for me. Yes, sir.
Is there a point where Taylor guitars would be too big? Or do you still anticipate growth in the company?
Yes, I think there is a point where Taylor guitars would be too big. I don't know what that point is. I have seen some guitar companies that are too big. So I know that it can happen. Usually they get too big by snapping up a bunch of other brands and become a conglomerate. So there's some guitar companies out there that not only own their core brand, but they own 10 or 15 other brands of instruments. And then they try and sell all of that, and they defocus, and it gets a little bit big. I think that there's probably sort of a natural time when you understand it's too big. And I'm not sure exactly how that will manifest itself yet. For example, right now the amount of guitars that we build supplies the US, Japan. We probably do a quarter of the business that is there to be had in Japan. We probably do a third of the business that there is to be done in Europe, maybe a fourth. So we have a lot of growth potential in both Japan and Europe, just by gaining market share and building. And that's why we took over our own distribution in Europe, to be able to bring the Taylor love over there, because we really do a good job with our dealers here. It's a different culture, and we almost have to force feed them the love. You know, in Europe it's interesting because customer service as a concept over there hasn't caught on. They don't have such a thing, you know. And in America, customer service is everything, you know. So we're bringing that to them, and you find that they're a little bit resistant. The whole chain is kind of resistant. So we feel there's a lot of room for growth there. Right now I'm in the middle of learning to build classical guitars. And with that, that's a whole nother market. And it's as big as steel string guitars. We've added electric guitars. So, I don't know, it's probably, what's on the horizon is probably enough for us to double in size from what we are now, and then we'd have to stop and reassess. But yes, I think a guitar company can be so big, and then at that point it's not going to work anymore. Yes, sir.
Compare yourself as far as market share against, say, Martin or Gibson. Just acoustic only.
Acoustic only in the United States. We're the #1 seller in the U.S. over Martin, 11 out of 12 months a year for the last few years.
Then where would you position yourself on the electric now that you've branched out into that?
Oh, we're number 25, which is, you know, maybe we're number
But you're
20.
only
And that's
so
a,
young.
what's that?
It's so young.
In 10 years we'll be glad we did. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. we're not really worried about how much we're selling now. We're worried about just starting it because it takes people, it takes time. And as a matter of fact, we were showing we were having a discussion with a particular dealer, and we're looking at the guitars, and I was like, Mr. Dealer, what do you think this guitar needs to be successful in the market? And he looked at it, and he looked back at us, and he said, time. You know, there's nothing wrong with that guitar. That guitar's great, just needs time.
You guys might, well, I have some private questions I'd like to talk to you about my guitar.
Uh-huh.
I don't wanna hog it, but I just wanna make a comment. You guys make the best neck.
Thank you.
I was always saying, if they ever make an electric guitar and put their neck on it, that's gonna be great.
Yeah, our electric guitar necks are really good. And there's a method behind the madness of our neck. Because if I had a group of dealers in here that was as big as you, and I said, raise your hand if you think Taylor makes the best sounding guitar that there is, well, they wouldn't want to do it because some of them aren't going to raise their hand. And I'd venture to guess that maybe 40% of those hands would grow up, and if I say that to that group, they'll go, yeah, that's probably about all you'll get, you know. And if I made my guitar sound a way so that you'd finally put your hand up, this hand might go down, right? That would be kind of like me saying, raise your hand if you think, you know, In-N-Out is the best burger, you know. I mean, there could be people who go, oh, I like Johnny Rockets, I like, you know, it's just kind of. So to me, sound is unwinnable. There is such a good thing as sound, but it's so subjective, you could never, ever, ever win that game. But if I say to the same dealers, raise your hand if you think Taylor makes the best necks, the best playing guitars, boom, every hand just fervently goes up. I don't even finish the sentence, the question before the hands. Or if I say, raise your hand if you think we make the most consistent guitar that comes into your store, all the hands go up. So that is a part of a guitar that's objective. You can win that game. I figured that out 25 years ago and decided that I would I would get a PhD in guitar necks. And other people haven't focused on that. They've just sort of let it ride. But what we've done here with the guitar neck and how a guitar can play is something that everybody notices. If you dig the sound, great. If you don't, can't help you. You know. Yes, sir.
So did you set out to make that the distinguishing characteristic, or did it just happen that way?
When I made my first couple of guitars, I carved skinny necks that were easy to play because I didn't know any better. Didn't know anything about guitars. Never seen a Martin. Didn't know what a Fender was. Heard about Gibson, but I'd never seen one. Never repaired a guitar. Never worked on a guitar. I just built a guitar in wood shop so I could have a guitar. Right? And I didn't know any better. So I brought my version to the guitar, and you know, I don't know, I played a couple of guitars, the necks were fat. I didn't think, wow, these necks are fat. I didn't even think I was trying to improve anything. I was just making my thing, minding my own business, had nothing to do with anything else that was going on in the world around me. It was me and my guitar. The rest of the world was diffused. I didn't know anything about it. And then I gave those guitars to people, put it in their hands, and they're like, wow, what's up with this neck? And after that, I did that on purpose. Yes.
How much of your business background just came from Hard Knocks, and how much have you done with consultants or outside learning? You know, have you learned it all through osmosis of your business, or do you regularly?
No consultants ever, except for the one time when we sat down to try and get that business plan going and talking about employees. We kind of made a business plan, things that we were going to do over the next 5 years, and the biggest thing was learn how to take care of employees. And there were about 5 other projects, and then anytime we did anything that wasn't written down, we quit doing it immediately, you know. And that was the only time I can really remember using a consultant. And my partner learned on his own how to be a credible accountant. You know, the company's big now, and we have CFOs and all that kind of stuff, but still, I don't believe anything until Kurt tells me. When when he reads the profit and loss statements, and he explains it to me, like every time, for 36 years. Now, Bob, on this line, this shows are, I'm like, okay, right, that's supposed to be big, right? Yeah. All right, and this line, that's supposed to be small, okay. You know, he can't do anything about it if the profit, I have to go out and do something about it. So he's kind of like the banker, and I'm kind of like the layman. You know, I run the factory, I make the profit. His name is Listug. You want to hear a cool story? His name is Listug. Listug, not Lustig. There's some Lustigs around, but it's Listug, L-I-S-T-U-G. There's no Listugs anywhere. You know, it's like if there's a Listug, they're related to Kurt. You know, you can just open phone books, city after town after town, and that name doesn't exist. But the few that they are came from Minnesota. My family came from Wolf Point, Montana, and I was up there for a family reunion. Wolf Point, Montana is in the middle of the Sioux Indian Reservation, right? And it is, well, some people were saying it was podunk, you know, and I go, if this was Africa, you'd think it's exotic, you know? It's wheat fields, you know? It's just, you think it's podunk because it's close to home, but if it was somewhere else, you'd think, wow, this is amazing. We went up there and went into this little museum, and it was down in the basement. A lady had it going. It was a museum of Wolf Point, Montana, and my forefathers had come from there a few generations. That's where my Uncle John Taylor rebred the Appaloosa horse after he'd, you know, when the cavalry finally chased down Chief Joseph and the Nez Perce Indians, the first thing they did was kill their Appaloosas, and they went extinct, and my uncle rebred them, and I went and saw the corrals where he did that in, and that kind of thing. And I'm looking through this thing, it wasn't unlike this, and I saw this picture of George Washington, and I went over and looked at it. It was this hand-painted thing of George Washington. Down at the bottom, it said, lovingly dedicated to the city of Wolf Point by Andrew Listug, 1887. Andrew Listug? So then I went over and they had like the big book of Wolf Point, you know, someone put together, and I flipped through it and I found his name. I photocopied it and took it home, and Kurt's Uncle Cliff happened to be in town. And I showed it to him. He goes, yeah, that's your great uncle, right? And I'm like, yeah, he was in Wolf Point with my great-great-grandfather. And you know what he was? The banker. Is that like too weird or what? Pretty funny. So we learned on the job. Totally learned on the job. But we, as far as factories go, I keep my eyes open, and I keep up on the technology. We're a pretty high technology factory right now. Yes, sir.
A couple things, but do you ever have meetings with your staff and you say, gee, I saw Clapton at the sports arena. Why is he not playing Taylor guitars, staff? Why are we not working on that? I mean, do you talk about that? Do you care about that?
Yeah, we have an artist relations director. We have a whole department for that. And yes, we care about that. But we don't pursue anybody ever unless they're brand spanking new and we believe in them. We want to make sure that we get them. You know, who's that kid now? What's his name? Shalice?
Graham Stokey.
Yeah, Graham Stokey. Uh-huh. Yeah, we don't want to let him get away. He already plays a Taylor. I write a couple stories about that type. I write about artist relations in the book and how we do that type of thing. I remember the day when the receptionist said, Bob, I got this guy on the phone, and he says he just wants to talk to you about his daughter. You know, okay, he gets on the phone, he's like, okay, I know you've heard this 100 times before, but my daughter, she's 12, and I bought her one of your guitars because that's what she wanted, a big Koa guitar, and you know, she's just really good. She writes really good stuff. If I send you some, you know, MP3s or some CDs of her songs, would you listen to them? Because, you know, she's got talent, and I think she's going to make it big. His name was Scott Swift, and his daughter's name was Taylor, you know, and they sent that CD, and we listened to it, and it's like, cracky, this girl's hot. You know, she could write and sing at 12 years old. So we pretty much put a hedge around her and made sure that we took care of her during all those years, and she takes care of us now. We take care of each other. But if somebody like Clapton already has relationships, let that live. We would never want to have everyone playing our guitars. You got to have that friction. You got to have them championing other stuff. It fuels everything.
10
So-
years from now, you're gonna wish, God, we should have done that.
Clapton's been so gone. You know, the old rock gods, they're gone. They already did their thing. I'm too new of a company for them. Those guys that grew up on Fender and Gibson, they're never going to move to our camp. I'm looking for my generation and the generation below us. I had our artist relations guy a few years ago was showing electric guitars to a bunch of guys in Nashville. Oh, they love them. You know, they love the guitars. You know, these are guys that are in their 40s. They're the cool cats. They're the kings of the hill in Nashville. They're the Nashville cats that play in the studio and on stage, the sidemen. And they're like, we love your guitar, but we just love our classic rock and roll guitars, our Gibson, our Fenders. What are you gonna do about that? And his answer was, we're gonna wait for you to die and we're gonna sell to your kids. You know? And so sometimes that's what you have to do. But we're very, very involved, and you know, you saw his, you know, Seth's page of people who play our guitars. We have our fair share. Yes, sir.
How did you come up with your neck joint?
Well, it evolved over a long time. You know, the first, he's talking about the way the neck goes onto the body. Typically, there's a mortise and tenon joint that's tapered. They call it a dovetail joint. It's what they use on violins and cellos and, you know, that type of thing. It's a good strong joint for a guitar neck, and you handcraft it. And you put the neck in, and on an archtop guitar, a violin, a cello, they're made differently because they sit up high and it points up here, and you can make, it doesn't really matter, it floats above the top. But a steel string guitar doesn't. Part of the fretboard lays onto the guitar top, and the angle at which that neck hits the body is hypercritical to how well the guitar plays. And that joint, which was used forever, it was, you know, really, it found its way onto guitars by C.F. Martin, the founder, 175 years ago, because he was a violin maker, you know. And when he came over here, he wanted to make guitars in Germany, and they wouldn't let him do it. You know, no, you can't do it. Can't be. You know, the guild ran him out of town because it wasn't a serious instrument. So he immigrated to the United States and started making guitars, right? And he made them in the style that you would make a violin, same type of joints. All these years later, they still use the same thing. My very first guitars that I made, I started in on one of those and thought, there's no future in this. I chopped all that off and put bolts in and just bolted it on and went at it like that. And then it evolved to what it is now. What it is now is really kind of high tech because this is actually inlaid into the guitar this way and this way. So this has a shape and there's a hole that it fits into, and it's almost impossible woodworking. The accuracy of it is mind-boggling. You know, it's woodworking. And we'll sit around the table and have an hour-long discussion about the tolerances of this stuff, and then we'll go, do you realize for an hour we've been arguing over 3/1000ths of an inch? You know, like passionately, whether it's 3/1000ths or whether it's 1/1000th, you know, and it's woodworking. I mean, it's so close that if we make a colored guitar with color on it, we have to carve the neck smaller because there's more finish on that guitar. You know, we have to allow for how thick the finish is for it to fit. And so I think that the current version evolved after 25 years of making stuff, and our technology caught up with what our ideas were, with new modern computerized machines that can do the carving that you couldn't make this guitar with a chisel. If you were the best chiseler in the world, it would be really hard to do.
What year did you start using CNC?
1989 we got our very first machine. It came in, got rolled in, and sat on the floor. And then I had my IBM AT computer with a CAD program with no instructions, no user manual. And I turned it on, and that little C prompt blinked at me. I put on my earphones and I loaded the program and I learned how to use it. And then I'd walk out and bolt down my wood and load a floppy disk into the machine, and I'd push the go button and, you know, we learned how to do it. Now we have the brand that we use is called Fidal. Stands for Frank, Al, Dave, and Larry, or something like that. You know, it's just the guys that started the company, Francis, Al, Dave, and Larry. And we're their second largest customer. The first largest is Ford Motor Company, and then Taylor Guitars. We just really bought into those machines. What type of time are we on there?
It's about 7:45.
Yeah?
Yeah. So
Does that mean
do you-
stop, or does that mean
If
go?
we have a couple more, I have one question that I'd like to ask. So
Okay.
maybe two more questions, and then we'll sign the
Okay.
books.
All right.
Do you know, before anyone's ever played, like say you make the prototype guitar, do you know that's a great guitar before it's played? And then when they've manufactured 100, how do you make sure the 100th sounds just as good as the first one? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do know what you mean. We don't know it's a good guitar, a prototype, before it's played, except for we do. There's nuances that we're looking for, and there's surprises. It would be kind of like, again, I'll make a food analogy. A chef could say, what ingredients do I have in here? I'm going to put this together, and I know it's going to taste good, right? A good chef would do that. He's not going to like put this stuff together, and it's like, whoa, I don't have any idea how that would taste. Just like you can eat something and go, I taste fennel, and you just list everything it is. You can go home and make it, and you know that it's going to be fine, unless you really screwed up. So we've made so many guitars that we know where we're going with this. And we kind of know what changes are going to take place. So the way to make sure that all of the guitars that we do end up being good is to have really tight tolerances with what we manufacture. Weigh the wood, measure the wood, put things on gram scales, come up with a design, and then we build the guitar that way. And it's pretty, you know, our dealers raise their hand. They shove their hand in the air when we say, do we make the most consistent guitar? And it really has to do with just accurate manufacturing. It starts with the wood that you pick, you know. There's specifications for the wood, and those are hard to just rattle off on a list. It's a lot of just sort of your supplier, and together with our supplier, together with us, we know what kind of wood we like. And if we all evaporated and a new group of people came in without that sort of beehive mentality, you'd have to start at the beginning. But as long as there's sort of that hive of people that collectively know how to do things, it just continues to repeat. Sometimes there's surprises. Like we made a guitar recently where we moved the neck down and joined it to the body at the 12th fret instead of the 14th fret, because we thought it'd be cool. Well, we didn't realize it'd be that cool. I mean, that guitar just sounded way, way, way better than I would have planned, you know. And so sometimes we get lucky, you know. And when that happens, we'll take the win, you know. We'll take it. That was the 12th fret Grand Concert. But I think he's talking about the GS Mini, this little guitar here. This is a real simple guitar, doesn't cost too much money. It's a travel guitar, it's a parlor guitar, it's a lapdog. And I think this is probably one of our biggest accomplishments. I'm probably more proud of this guitar than even our best guitars, because it's little, well, if you tune it. I like the photographers because they always think that they have to be like this. You know? We'll tune that up later and play it, but it just sounds incredible. Its sound is big and warm and rich, and it's the perfect guitar. I've taken that. I took it to Iraq and back, and I've taken it to the desert and back, and I've taken it just all over the place with me, and it's just so easy to carry on your back, throw it in the overhead of the plane, and when you get where you're going, play it. It's wonderful. We're making a lot of those. Okay, I see 1, 2, 3. We're going to do it like that. And don't anybody else dare put your hand up. First you.
Okay, real quick, that's one of the things I got from the factory tour, that the incredible tolerances and travel a far distance to get the wood and everything going to manufacture. When I left the factory, I realized, well, what about the strings? When do you, or how do you decide what strings to put on it?
We use Elixir strings. They're made by Gore, who makes Gore-Tex and Glide dental floss. They put a Teflon coating over them, and it saves the strings, makes them last for months. We love those strings. We love those strings.
How long have you been using those? Decades?
7 years. Yeah, right behind.
Bob, what drove you to design or come up with the travel guitar? Just something that you seem like, gee, it'd be a great idea if we had something like that? Or?
The first guitar that we did that was a travel guitar is called a Baby Taylor.
Okay.
That's 15 years ago. I've made 50 of those guitars a day for 15 years. And end of last year we were making 100 a day just to fill the orders by Christmas. Ridiculous. That guitar started out as a ukulele. Everything we do turns into a guitar. People go, when are you going to make a bass? I go, I'm never going to make a bass. I've been lying to you for years. I'm not going to do it because we turn it into a guitar. So ukuleles were a big deal, and I started working on them, and then I got really sort of ready to go and actually start making the tooling, which is a big investment, and I said, wait just a minute, Professor. If I go through all this work and I make a ukulele, how many am I going to sell? But if I made a little guitar, how many would I sell? I chose the guitar. And that's how that one happened. It wasn't a master plan. It was kind of a fluke. Yeah. Yes, sir.
As you've expanded both here and into Cade, what's it like to get qualified craftspeople? Do you do a lot of training when you bring people on?
Yeah, we have a really robust training program. We have a person who's in charge of training. We have a training room. The material is deep. It's all internet-based. There's, oh my gosh, it's really, really well developed. We've been working on it for a long time. We have certified trainers in the business. You come in, you get a skills test as part of your interviewing process. It takes a couple hours. We find out if you have some type of affinity for a factory. Do you have hand skills? You know, do you like this type of thing? You get a job, you come in, you're assigned one-on-one with a certified trainer who starts training you how to do your thing. And again, it's what we do. I mean, we do it every day. We hire and train and build. So to us, it's just part of what we do. And though in the early days, it was really hard for us to find people, and now it's easier because we've gotten better at it. So we can teach people. Okay, wrap it up.
Thank you.